There was a time that I didn't think self-identifying as a PDA was a good idea, but now I'm glad to say that I have eaten my words, changed my mind, and now believe that self-identifying as a PDA, like self-identifying as autistic, isn't only acceptable, but preferable. I have never viewed self-identifying as a problem when it comes to being autistic. Why? Because I don't view autism as a defect, illness, or disorder. I view being autistic as a natural variation in human neurology and experience. To show how absurd the pathology paradigm is, homosexuality was a diagnosable mental disorder up until 1973, when the American Psychiatric Association removed it from the second edition of the DSM. As society becomes more tolerant and inclusive and educated, we gradually cease to pathologize what are harmless, perfectly acceptable, and natural variations in human experience. We still have a long way to go, of course. Also, I think that if a person is exploring the possibility that they are autistic on autistic-led pages, the chances of them being neurotypical are probably rather slim. Right, so now I need to make a confession. In spite of everything I said above, a couple of years ago, I was practically, but not completely, anti-self-identifying when it came specifically to PDA. Rest assured, everyone, after much consideration and listening to other people's views on this topic, my own views have evolved, softened, and perhaps broadened. I'm now totally cool with people self-identifying as a PDA. I wasn't always that way, though. Pre-2019, I was perfectly fine with people self-identifying as PDA. So what happened? I started to explore the many forms that demand avoidance can take. There are so many. I couldn't help but feel that people, prior to self-identifying with PDA, probably need to be aware that there is more to demand avoidance than the demand avoidance of the PDA kind, and, failing that, perhaps seeking out the second opinion of a clinician who specialises in diagnosing PDA would be a good idea. I knew I wasn't comfortable with leaning towards a privileged, medical and deficit-infused position, and I knew the social consequences of taking this position would be dire. The vast majority of the community are in favour of self-identifying. But because PDA was and still is so little understood, and because this way of being is so utterly complex, I wondered, at this stage in the game, if it was even possible to self-identify as PDA. This, as I said before, contradicted my position when it came to self-identifying as autistic. I believed then, as I do now, that self-identifying is acceptable when it comes to being autistic. So I was a walking contradiction. I sought to rectify this in my mind as I couldn't tolerate the discrepancies. And so these days I'm totally cool with self-identifying when it comes to PDA and accept it wholeheartedly as a person's right. If my previous positions on this issue have upset anyone, then I apologise. It was a work in progress. I cared about PDA so much that, in all honesty, I didn't want the essence of PDA to be diluted through self-identifying at a time we knew so little about PDA. To me, assuming this position was an act of safety. In my heart, I always wanted to get to a place where self-identifying as PDA was possible, because I knew my views were controversial and potentially destructive. I still, however, believe there ought to be a process involved when self-identifying as any way of being, but I think most people would do the following, which I've broken down into 3 pillars, automatically and unthinkingly anyway. Number 1. Observing, analysing, understanding and knowing thyself. I think most people are drawn to the online communities because they have redirected their attention inwards for a number of reasons. Self-exploration of some kind is, after all, often what leads to the discovery that one might be autistic. Self-awareness helps tremendously, but this goes without saying. Number 2, reading and studying and learning as much as one can through books or academic studies, if that's your thing, or through attending seminars and conferences, reading the posts and watching the videos of neurodivergent advocates. I mean, to be honest, this pillar may precede the first. A parent of an autistic child may frequent the social media pages of autistic adults to educate themselves on how they can best support their child, and in doing so, end up reading a post, having their own light bulb moment and relating to the content themselves. Also, this pillar is important for the purposes of differentiation, which I touched on earlier. Perhaps a person reads up cursorily about PDA and believes that the literature is describing their life, but then, upon looking into demand avoidance further, they discover that their demand avoidance is actually best explained by autistic inertia. The same could happen to someone who believes their demand avoidance is due to executive dysfunction. Upon reading further into PDA, they may find that this is a better explanation for the phenomena they experience. Is accuracy not important when it comes to knowing and understanding who we are? As I have also said many times before, PDA is so much more than demand avoidance. It is a whole constellation of expressions and characteristics, special interests in people, for example, boundless creative and abstract thinking, withdrawal into fantasy and or role play, and coming up with elaborate excuses used as demand avoidance strategies, failure to recognise authority, impulsivity, and absolute intolerance of uncertainty, are all equally important aspects of PDA as demand avoidances. Number 3, comparing experiences with other people in the community. What better source of information do we have than other people who may be going through something similar? This is arguably more important than Pillar 2 in some cases. Perhaps use Pillar 2 as a reference point of that which is being experienced. In order to understand the documented phenomena in textbooks, the best and most thorough education one can receive is from listening to the descriptions of those with direct personal experience. This pillar is important too, in the sense that one will experience this blissful and transcendental sense of harmony, resonance and communion when they make contact with their true neurokin. I'm not saying people should do the above before they self-identify, because I think most people do the above automatically anyway. And that is precisely why I ended up changing my mind about self-identifying as PDA. Who am I to doubt a person's process of self-discovery? For the record, I have friends who still felt the need to pursue an official diagnosis before they felt comfortable accepting that they're autistic or PDA, and this is absolutely fine too. We are all different and rely on different indicators when it comes to understanding ourselves. I'm not proud of my previous position. I suppose that sometimes, upon reading more and thinking about things more, especially when it comes to ever complex and little understood ways of being like PDA, one's positions may take unusual turns. Fortunately though, after reading and thinking about it even more, and through engaging with other people who challenged my views, my position on this issue eventually returned to what it was originally, that self-identifying when it comes to PDA, like being autistic, is perfectly valid and acceptable. To those of you who challenged my views on this and helped steer me towards my current position, thank you. I'm glad I listened to you, and I feel liberated now.